Good evening and welcome to the City of Farmers Branch Planning and Zoning meeting study session. It's presently Monday, April 14th, 2025, 6:03 p.m. We'll start with a discussion of the regular agenda items from A1, which takes us to item C1. Consider approval of the March 10th, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission minutes and take appropriate action. Commissioners, any typos, errors, omissions? All right, seeing none, we'll move to item D1. A reminder, this is a public hearing. We will conduct a public hearing and consider the request for a specific use permit for a gasoline service station and convenience store on approximately 1.48 acres located at 13601 Midway Road within PD 64 and take appropriate action.
Hi, Brett Mangum, lead planner with the Development Department. And I'm here to answer any questions if anybody has any on these two regular agenda items, 25 SU02 and 25 ZA03.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Go ahead.
Did the property owner come to us, or did staff dig this up somewhere? How did this come to the city?
This application was filed by the developer.
Okay. And I did not read the report that closely, but did the staff make any kind of recommendations?
We don't officially make any recommendations on our staff reports.
Did you see a traffic study per chance?
And I can clarify, Perla Tavera, Director of Economic Development, Tourism, and Planning. No, we did not go to the owner. The owner came to us regarding this request, just to clarify that one.
I'm going to preach for a second. There's 3 private schools in that area. Westwood, the high school, plus the new school that we put in that building around the corner. It's coming from over off Royal Lane. There's apartment complex already sitting there on Alpha. There's $700,000 townhomes right behind this proposed location. There's a new apartment complex going in across the street with about 280 units in it. The traffic is already terrible at that location. In my opinion, because I lived here 35 years, that is absolutely the worst location in Farmers Branch for a quick trip. Great operation, great company, terrible location for a quick trip. That's just me.
I can just add a little bit to that in terms of the traffic study. Because this is an existing developed site, the increase in traffic expected from a gas station we agree there probably will be an increase compared to the current bank building. The change was not something that triggered a full-blown TIA. That said, our Public Works Department has looked at this. And the specific use permit is the perfect opportunity for you to say whether the use is appropriate in that location or not. That's kind of the benefit of this type of request, is that we can take into consideration the context and some of the things that you just mentioned and factor that into the determination.
That's good. There's actually 4 private schools. I forgot about Green Hill School up on the corner.
Other questions? Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. Was there an assessment of the economic impact of this to the city, and in particular, what the tax revenue for the city from this might be?
The tax revenue is not something that factors into the zoning review for this. The applicant may be able to provide that detail, though, during the hearing.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, in the staff report, talks about the comprehensive plan and that the plan recommends tri or quadplexes, townhomes, small lot detached homes or apartments, which, but as I look at that site, it's very small. So I guess I'm wondering, realistically, is there a way that any of those types of housing projects would ever go into that location?
It's a great question, and the future land use map that's included in the comprehensive plan is intended to be general. It's not parcel by parcel specific, so because there is multifamily to the west of that site, it's likely that's why the high-density residential designation was carried over to this site. That said, like you mentioned, it's a small site. It's unlikely that a full-scale multifamily project or residential use would develop there, given that it is a high-profile commercial corner. And if you look at the plan designation for the majority of the Midway corridor, you're going to see either mixed use or some sort of commercial designation. So this is sort of a weird spot on the future land use map.
Okay, and given that, like a quick trip there, just knowing the quick trip at Lunar Road and 635, very busy, very successful. It's one of the spots in the Citizens on patrols where they kind of, we drive through there, not making any claims about crime or anything, but there's just a lot of traffic, a lot of parking, just a lot of things going on. It would be probably the most activity of anything that we could put in there is going to be with this quick trip. I mean, we could put a Starbucks or anything else, and it's just not going to have the same level. So for me, I guess the first question is, it just doesn't seem like it's ever going to be townhomes. I mean, it's too small, right? I mean, so it's going to be some kind of retail or of some kind. So the question becomes then, what makes the most sense for that parcel?
I'll add in that townhomes and residential uses are not allowed by right by the zoning there. So if that use were desired on that corner, they would have to come through the same exact process.
Further questions? Go ahead. Pat?
If I'm reading the maps correctly, the other side of Midway, this would be allowed by right on, just if it was on the other side of the street, right?
This would be more consistent with the comprehensive plan designation, but it's not allowed by right. To my knowledge, there are no locations in Farmers Branch where this is allowed by right. It's always going to go through the specific use permit process.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm not super excited about it as much as I'm impressed with the Quick Trip organization for what I've seen of it over the years. There's a very large new Quick Trip just at, I believe it's Marsh and Forest. Yes. So it just seems, I don't know, it seems like it would attract a lot more traffic at night, late hours. I know a lot of the Quick Trips, I got the impression they're 24 hours. Somehow that just doesn't feel right for that area. I think after 7 or 8 o'clock at night, being in almost a residential area, you would want to minimize traffic and not just attract it. So, and it just doesn't seem like it's something we even need, because we can go quickly down to Forest Lane and get access to gasoline. So, I don't know. What were the hours of operation that they would do?
According to the application documents, it would be a 24-hour operation.
Yeah.
With that being said, the alcohol sales portion would be regulated by TABC regulations, so there's certain hours for that are not 24 hours.
Go ahead.
Have there been any studies done as far as the term of, Quick Trip occupying this space? What happens after that? Because it being a gas station, there will likely be some remediation that will have to be done at the end of their tenure. So do we have any idea what that looks like, looking forward to 2045?
Yeah, thank you for your question. To answer that, these two applications, one of them, the alcohol specifically, which is ZA03, that is one that's kind of unique. Once it's granted, it is there in perpetuity. The SUP is a little bit different in that there's typically not a time limit put on those. There have been in the past instances where SUPs can have term limits. We're not proposing one in the draft ordinance currently for this particular case. But to answer your question, there have not been any studies specifically for in the event that QT ever moves out or the tenancy changes.
I've got one question from the peanut gallery here. I love Quick Trip maybe more than most. there is that 7-Eleven on the southwest corner of Midway and Spring Valley. And in all my years in law enforcement in Dallas, one of the things that we found out quite often is that the more gas stations you had in a condensed area, the more likelihood late night, especially if they're run 24 hours, there tends to be more activity that the police departments have to take care of. I'd like to have a quick trip there, but having that and a 7-Eleven within one major block of each other is a little concerning because of the additional activity, particularly on the weekends and particularly late nights.
I did want to clarify on Commissioner Kirby. They do have to follow TCQ guidelines as well regarding remediation for any gasoline, especially underground.
And as for traffic, I just noticed when I drove there, as you are heading east on Alpha Road, to get to that gas station, you kind of have to turn, then you have to go down, then you have to take a U-turn on Midway to get in because there's no access, right? Because it's just, so that, I mean, that just sort of strikes me as a potential, area of concern. And then also currently there's a median, I guess, between the alley and the gas station. Is that staying there? So where is the ingress and egress for this location? Is there any in the alley, or are they on Midway and Alpha?
Brett, could you pull up the site plan in the presentation?
Sure, Sarah.
They're primarily maintaining the exact same ingress and egress points that exist today. So you can kind of see on the north end is where you connect into the fire lane. There we go. That connects you to Alpha. And so those access points exist today, and they're proposing that they would stay.
Okay. Yeah.
Further questions? Sorry. Further questions for staff? Any further inquiries? Okay, thank you. We'll probably hear from you again next, because up next is item D2, conduct a public hearing and consider the request to amend the comprehensive zoning ordinance, Article 5.5, beer and wine sales overlay district, and Appendix C maps to allow beer and wine sales for off-premise consumption on approximately 1.48 acres of property located at 13601 Midway Road, and take appropriate action. Thanks, Brett.
Thank you, Chair Raley. Again, Brett Mangum, lead planner with the Department of Economic Development, Tourism, and Planning. And this is a companion case to the one we were just discussing. Specifically, this is for the alcohol sales component of the future proposed QT gas station and convenience store. And happy to answer any questions that anybody has on this particular case.
I just have one. I was curious, the 7-Eleven up on, that has been mentioned at Midway and Spring Valley, do they sell beer and wine at that location?
I will verify that for you right now.
Look at that stuff. Well, that's chemical. It's $80
Brett, would you be able to pull up the overlay map in the presentation?
I just noticed today.
No, that site is not within the overlay district.
So that's dry 7-Eleven?
Further questions? All right, I'm not seeing further questions. Okay, thank you again. All right.
Thank you.
We will move on to item A2, receive a presentation from Eric Mueller, PE CFM Stormwater Engineer regarding stormwater management in Farmers Branch. Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you. Let me get this pulled up for you guys. So Eric Mueller, City Stormwater Engineer with the Public Works Department here at Farmers Branch. happy to be up here today talking to you guys, giving you guys a lowdown on stormwater management in Farmers Branch and kind of as things get presented to us, both in public and private development, how we manage those things and what we're doing to address those issues. So, brief introduction. You kind of got to know me a little bit back in the dinner room over there, but I've been on staff since this past July. Previously was at a private consulting firm, and I am a Farmers Branch resident, so it's fun to be able to serve the city that I work in. So in case there are any lingering questions or things that you guys want to talk about after this presentation, we'll have time to discuss any questions you guys have at the end of the presentation, but my contact information is there for you guys to reach out. So before I kind of dive into what our regulations are and kind of what our current projects are in regards to stormwater, kind of want to just give a brief overview of what kind of effects we see on our stormwater when development happens. First and foremost, typically when areas develop, we see increased flooding risks. What happens is you get areas that used to be grassed or woods or something like that, and you put down pavement, water can't get in the ground, so it's running off, it's going directly to our creeks, and it's typically getting to creeks and waterways faster than it would otherwise. So you kind of lose both the infiltration and then also water sheds off more quickly. And what happens when that happens is typically the creeks get more overwhelmed. You get more water in there and you get that water in quicker. Your flash flooding happens more often, raising water levels, causing more flooding. Alongside that, we see a lot more channel erosion, and this is a big one for us here in the city. As more water gets to creeks and waterways, it wants to shove down creek a lot quicker, and that'll shear off big chunks of soil, shear off all the plant vegetation, and eventually you end up with these sheer bank walls that are not stable and will constantly erode until it reaches eventually a stable place, but usually that takes many years for that to happen. But we do see that when development happens. Also, increased pollutants in the water. It's kind of part and parcel with just development in general. You know, when you have an undeveloped area, there usually isn't a lot of human activity that could generate pollutants. Once you start building, auto repair shops, homes where you're doing oil changes, or you're dumping leaves in inlets, stuff like that, that generates a lot more pollutants in our waterways. And that's just kind of part and parcel with what happens with development. We also see increased maintenance costs just because we're dealing with more water, we're dealing with more debris that's getting into our waterways. You can see there a couple of the pictures that I've included in that slide. That's from our city. The top picture is from Farmers Branch Creek when we actually had a private dam fail on the creek. I think it was about 6 years ago at this point. And then the bottom photo there is actually from the culvert crossing at Josie and Rawhide Lane. And this is before we did a project a couple years ago to repair that concrete. You can see it's all busted up there. So I like to categorize stormwater into two different buckets. One is floodplain and drainage, basically how much water is getting into our creeks and where is it going. And then the other part is stormwater quality. And they're kind of managed in two different ways. And so I'll kind of break it up for this presentation to those two categories. So we'll start with floodplain and drainage. So for floodplain and drainage, I've kind of split it up into four categories. It gets a little bit more detailed than this, but I'll kind of talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. So with floodplain regulation, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, runs the National Flood Insurance Program. Now, what they've done in order to run the National Flood Insurance Program is they've established flood insurance rate maps. All of these have acronyms, of course. And on those maps, they've delineated, either through approximate methods or detailed studies, the limits of what's called the floodplain, which is basically the extent to which water gets out of a creek during a major storm event. What they typically manage and what's typically managed in a lot of cities is the 100-year floodplain. So what that means is they're kind of delineating where they think the water would be in a once in 100-year rainfall event. And so they use that line to determine flood insurance rates and to regulate development in those areas. Now, the important part of floodplain regulation for us as a city is we want to make sure our residents have access to the National Flood Insurance Program. And the reason why our residents have access to that is the city regulates the floodplain based on FEMA's regulations. We're the ones actually kind of policing the floodplain and doing the work on the ground. And if we didn't do that, our residents would not have access to flood insurance through the federal program. So that's why it's really important. Beyond any other kind of protecting other properties, that's why it's really important to us and why we take that very seriously. Now, we have additional requirements beyond just basic FEMA requirements that we impose as a city on the floodplain that are a little bit stricter than FEMA's criteria. And we do that to protect life and property on a more stringent basis when people want to develop in the floodplain. So kind of moving down to local drainage regulation. Now, there's a lot of areas that receive water and rain that is not just the creek. So storm sewers, lot-to-lot drainage, stuff like that. We have a lot of requirements regarding that as well. We've got a whole storm drainage design manual that's dedicated to this. It tells us the various methodologies we like to use in order to determine how big our storm sewers should be, in order to determine what grade a channel should be at, stuff like that. In addition to stuff like detention requirements, stormwater detention requirements. Those are outlined in our regulations as well. And that's a local regulation that we impose. So past that, in terms of getting beyond regulation, we also have our drainage capital improvement projects. A good example, if you came in on Valley View, we just got one started there. That's drainage related. We're increasing the size of the storm sewer underneath Valley View to aid in the flooding that kind of happens over in this area right here. Amongst other projects, we do a lot of erosion control projects as well along Farmers Ranch Creek, Rawhide Creek. Another big one is we just completed the Cooks Creek channel expansion project, which completely redid that whole concrete line channel, expanded the capacity to help remove some homes from the floodplain in that area. And then we have stormwater utility management. As residents of the city, you've probably seen that little stormwater charge on your utility bill. What that is basically the funding that goes into helping us pay for our capital improvement projects. So all of our funding that we use to pay for those projects comes directly from that. And so as a part of managing that, we need to make sure that we are making sure our rates are appropriate for our funding needs for the projects that need to get done. In addition, these rates that are charged through the stormwater utility are based on impervious area. Residential properties are divided into 3 different categories depending on impervious square footage on your lot. And then commercial properties are assigned a very individualized rate based on how much imperviousness they have on their property. And so as a part of that, we have to maintain a data set which tells us what the square footage of impervious area is on each property. And so that's a big GIS database that we use to help making sure that we are charging the correct rates to everybody in the city. And this is just kind of a map showing where our different drainage basins are. You've got Farmers Ranch Creek in the southern half of the city, Rawhide Creek kind of in the middle, and Cooks Creek on the northern half. And then we've kind of got Valwood on the east side of town, or west side of town rather, that drains directly to the Elm Fork. And they kind of operate a little bit differently since that's all protected by levees, which is a whole different subject in itself, but they help manage that area. Now keep in mind, the areas denoted on here aren't the total complete watersheds for each of the creeks. They're just the areas of our city that contribute to the creeks. There are areas of Addison, and I think a little bit of Dallas that contribute to Farmers Branch Creek. Addison contributes to Rawhide Creek, and Carrollton contributes to Cooks Creek. And this is just a few images that are typical things that come across my desk. Top left image is a snip of the flood insurance rate map around City Hall, just to our south here. It's kind of one of the more interesting looking areas of the floodplain. But all of you can access the flood insurance rate maps through FEMA. A simple Google search of National Flood Hazard Layer will take you to a GIS webpage where you can just search for Farmers Branch in the address page. It'll take you right to our city, and you can kind of look around to see where the floodplain lies in different areas of the city. And the bottom left is another example of a capital improvement project we recently wrapped up.
This is where it is, where he's moved.
That concrete apron you see at the below all the culvert openings there, that was failing and needed to be replaced. So we had to go in there and get that all replaced so that the culverts would be structurally stable, and so therefore the road would be structurally stable. This was over at Rawhide Creek in Valley View, is where that project was. Top right is a snip from a plan set for a big erosion control project we did on Farmers Branch Creek. It was a big Gabion wall project to restore some eroded areas through there. And then bottom right is just a snip from our storm drainage requirements manual, just a little detention section, but there's a lot more pages than that to it. So I'll move on.
Do you want
to-
questions at the end?
That'd be great.
Okay.
So we'll move on to stormwater quality. So stormwater quality is kind of its own separate deal, separate from the quantity of stormwater we receive. So the top line here I have is stormwater permit requirements. So a lot of what we do in Farmers Branch in regards to stormwater quality has to do with the stormwater permit that we received through the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, or TCEQ, which outlines basically our rules and our regulations that we have to follow in order to discharge our water, basically our stormwater that goes into our inlets, to our creeks without having to treat it, more or less. And that's basically where those requirements are imposed on us because TCEQ helps the EPA manage the requirements set forth in the Clean Water Act. It all stems from the Clean Water Act, these requirements. So basically, the stormwater permit is rules and regulations for us to make sure that our stormwater as it enters the creek is relatively clean. And so there's certain rules that we have to meet in order to do that. In case, just to kind of clarify, I put MS4 requirements, kind of parentheses there. You'll hear the term MS4 thrown around a lot and might not know what it means. It stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So back in the day when a lot of cities were first getting developed, all water, both stormwater and sanitary, black water, gray water, got put in the same sewer and got sent to the same place, whether it was directly to a creek or to a wastewater treatment plant. Well, what happens when you've got all of that water going to the same spot, let's say a treatment plant, is when you get a big rainstorm event, either that plant can't handle the amount of water that's coming to it, so it has to overflow it somewhere into either tanks to store it so it can treat it over time, or it just bypasses and gets dumped straight into the receiving water body. Well, as a part of trying to avoid that happening, systems were starting to become separated. Well, as a part of that, stormwater didn't get treated anymore. So there needed to be rules in place to make sure that that water was still clean. So moving down to the second bullet, one of the big things that we do as a city is illicit discharge elimination. So illicit discharge is basically anything that's going to one of our storm systems or creeks that shouldn't be going there. Think motor oil, a bunch of leaf clippings, stuff like that. Shouldn't be going in our inlets, shouldn't be going in our creeks. Our responsibility, if we either notice it or it's reported to us, is to go and investigate potential illicit discharges and making sure that they stop. That's one of the big things that we do. And we're kind of going out at a frequency of at least once or twice a week to different sites when we get a report in of, hey, I think somebody's putting motor oil here, or stuff like that. Another thing we do is public education. There's actually a lot of different requirements we have to meet in terms of doing public education. So for example, when we have Fish and Fun, not this weekend, but the weekend following, you probably see me there at a table with a bunch of different informational things trying to get kids to learn about stormwater. We'll see how successful I am, but we'll try. But that's one of our requirements, amongst other kinds of things. And the thinking behind that is, if we can educate the potential, the public, they know what they should or shouldn't be doing to start with, so we don't have to respond to as many things, or that original source of pollution may not happen. And another big one is construction regulation. So you guys probably all know when things develop, things get built, tears up a lot of dirt. You've got big heavy trucks with hydraulic lines, you've got concrete washout, you've got all kinds of stuff going on at a construction site. Well, there are regulations in place for developers and contractors to control their erosion and control their pollutants potentially coming off of their construction sites while they develop. And so as a part of that, they have to come up with erosion control plans and stormwater pollution prevention plans, which we oversee and make sure that they are following those by doing regular inspections. And if we notice that they aren't meeting their requirements, we let them know, tell them to fix it. If they don't fix it, the city does have the jurisdiction to levy citations, violations, as well as stop work orders if it's needed. We try not to get to that point though. And this is what I'm calling the MS4 system map. The important thing to note here, all the dots you see on that page, on that map, is points where water is entering one of our creeks or waterways. We've got a lot of different outfalls, a lot of different storm sewer systems that enter our creeks. All the blue lines on there, those are our storm pipes. All of the green lines on there, those are our open channels in creeks. We are in charge of making sure that all of those stay as clean as they can stay through our obligation with the permit. So it's a lot of area to cover. For the most part, we've got a really pretty clean city. So the job isn't terribly difficult, but the other important piece of this map is it helps us diagnose where potential pollution may be coming from. By maintaining this map of different outfalls and storm sewer systems and all of that good stuff, if we see, say, an oily sheen on Farmers Branch Creek, we know, okay, these are the systems upstream of that point. Let's start checking each one of these outfalls and see, do we see where this is coming from, and help make that diagnosis. So this is actually one of our requirements as a part of the permit, is to maintain a map like this because it's helpful for us to know where water may be coming from.
Is there a legend somewhere that shows what those are? Because there's red dots, there's purple dots. Anyway.
Yeah, so those are designating the difference between either outfalls of systems that the city owns or if they're private systems outfalling into our creeks. I wasn't able to clip in the, this is from a GIS map. So I wasn't able to kind of clip in the legend there. But that's what the different kind of colors are representing, is kind of different ownerships, more or less. Where the red is all of the systems that we own as the city. And I believe the purple ones are all the private outfalls into our creeks. I'll have to remember what the yellow ones are, but those are kind of the differences between there. And here's a couple, examples of things we're looking at when it comes to stormwater quality. A couple of examples. Top left, this happened on one of our residential streets a few months ago. Don't know what the source of this was, but we got notified that there were these barrels of nasty black sludge on a residential street. So it was our job to get those off the street, get those taken away, and get that sludge cleaned up. So we were out there with absorbent powder to make sure that it gets all soaked up, and we got it as clean as best as we can to eliminate that potential pollutant. Bottom left, you see there, that was a guy who had set up a mobile car washing business. Wasn't able to get out there in time to catch him, but it's important to note that actually this would be against our stormwater ordinance. Car washing can release nutrients and detergents and pollutants into our waterways. What you might or might not know is a lot of the commercial car washes that you see around, they actually tie directly into sanitary sewer. They either recycle their water or they send it to sanitary sewer. It doesn't go to storm sewer. And then the top right is an example of a bad construction site where obviously there's a lot of sediment going all over the place. We like to control that. We don't want to see sediment getting into our waterways. It can block up our pipes, it can block up our inlets, it can block up our waterways, it can smother wildlife. It's not a good thing. You might think it's just dirt, but it's not very good for our waterways. And then the bottom right is an example, another example of education. This is something, Do the Right Thing is kind of put on through the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We're a lot of us members of that council. We kind of get together to talk about our ideas. This was one thing that came up in terms of a campaign for public education. Pet waste is bad for our creeks due to the bacteria that's within it. So we encourage people and pick up after their pets. In addition to the benefits for creeks, it's also just a good neighborly thing to do. So some of our current and past projects we are doing to assess and address our stormwater issues, and this is not a comprehensive list, this is just some of the things that we've been doing. We've done a master drainage plan with Farmers Branch Creek. This has helped us identify a lot of different erosion control projects that we've done along that creek. We've done the Cook Street Channel expansion that I mentioned earlier, a lot of other erosion control projects, as well as drainage criteria revisions. The latest revision we did for the drainage manual was back in 2021, and that added a lot of additional detail and requirements and clarifications to what our expectations are when properties develop. So as we plan for future needs, there's a few things kind of up in the air of what we're looking at. One thing is more master drainage plan efforts, specifically for areas outside of Farmers Branch Creek. We have a really good study that we've done a lot of really good projects based on for Farmers Branch Creek, but there are obviously a lot of other areas of the city that need attention. And so we know of these issues, we just need to work to quantify the issues and figure out what the solutions will be to help address them. And then we're going to continue doing our projects to repair erosion and flood damage. The list consistently gets replenished, so we'll keep working through those as time goes on. We'll continue our enforcement of our regulations for development as well as redevelopment. One of the big questions that I often get during my job is, oh, my site's already developed, do I have to provide detention? The answer is yes in Farmers Branch. We do require that. So that's an important thing when we're talking about the issues we're facing on Farmers Branch Creek. We have a lot of industrial area at the upstream ends of the watershed, where once those areas start to redevelop, if they turn over dirt and start building again, will require stormwater detention. Now it's to not to existing conditions, or rather to undeveloped conditions. It's down to a rate which would be more equivalent to like a single family development, something like that. So the burden isn't, I would say, extremely heavy, but it's definitely a change when you're talking about having to take a site that's already developed and having to add detention to it when you redevelop it. But that's one of our cases where we're trying to make sure that we are planning ahead for the future. And then there's additional water quality considerations we can have in terms of going beyond the MS4 permit to benefit our creeks, and that kind of ties into the last thing of using green infrastructure where it's practical. Now on stuff like the storm sewer over here might not be as practical, but maybe on some of our creek projects moving forward, we'll be considering some more what I'll call structural green infrastructure that can help in that regard instead of just using walls or concrete, stuff like that. So I know there's a lot. I'm sure there's some questions, so I'm happy to take those now.
Thanks again. Thanks again. Commissioners, questions? I think you had, yep.
Yes, I have some questions. So you can even look at it in your mind or whatever, or go back to the Farmers Branch Creek upstream area. Okay. Do I need to keep, I don't have to, I push it once and then I can let off. I don't have to hang on it. Okay, great. So I happen to live on this creek, so I've got a 25-year history with it. And my impression is upstream, and if this is wrong, let me know, there has not been any limitation of impervious concrete that continues to get more and more upstream. So what it's done is increase the intensity of the stormwater events. And our back area, I would say it's gone down in elevation 8 feet, 10 feet over the last 10 years. One of the things that's exacerbated that, the thing, is that we used to have stationary body of water. It was a little pond. And we had an 18-foot dam that failed. You've got a picture of it earlier. And it protected that area and several homes, probably 10 homes, from having further erosion. But when that body of water is gone, it just gets deeper and deeper and cuts more. There used to be, if you go back 30, 40 years, you can see along this creek various smaller check dams. So there was one large dam, but then there were several check dams. It seems like the city's taken the approach that they won't allow even private citizens to improve those or improve those, so they just continue to erode those check dams. Is that a specific policy that the city has taken where they don't want to improve those check dams?
No, that's a great question. So I wouldn't say it's a policy to not allow them to happen. It's rather the regulations that go into place when we're talking about putting in a new check dam or repairing a check dam. We're going to ask for a floodplain study because you're working right in the middle of the creek, but it's not necessarily like they're disallowed. The other piece of that is the majority of Farmers Branch Creek is privately owned property that we don't have access to. And so in terms of us going in and trying to maintain those or trying to establish a way to maintain those, it's not really going to be
Right. And if you'll notice the way I said it, it was the city preventing homeowners from improving what was, not even improving, getting back to what was there when it was built 30, 40 years ago. So I haven't been very happy about that. The city manager, 2 people ago, told me he was going to oppose any reconstruction of dams because it would just increase the floodplain. So the counterfactual argument to that is, okay, well, so if we don't replace the dam, we should then be out of the floodplain because the dam failed. So that 18-foot is not there anymore, the water's not there anymore, and yet we're still in the FEMA floodplain. So to me, that doesn't make sense. So who can I talk to, and who can citizens talk to, not just me, but who can citizens talk to get resolution on some of this? Because it worries me, like if we go out 30, 40 more years from now, it keeps getting lower and lower. It's going to be very dangerous, 30-foot drop for your kids and stuff like that. So,
No, yeah, and I would say that the people to talk to is myself, Daniel Rick, city engineer, as well as our director, Ray. And we can kind of help guide what we would like to see done there. I will say especially with kind of the dam failing and whether or not the floodplain maps get updated, FEMA has their updating cycle. It's not very quick, but as a part of that, it will get updated. And at that point, we would hope that it would get adjusted. And as a part of them adjusting their flood insurance rate maps, they do extend to the city's opportunity to protest.
oh, that's
or to
wonderful.
provide
I didn't
technical
realize
background.
that. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Further questions? Okay.
I was curious about the Valwood area. Do you have any jurisdiction at all in that section, or is that just all managed by the Valwood Improvement District?
Yeah, it's mainly managed by Valwood Improvement Authority when it comes to new development. Now, we do still review developments as they come in. Their system is designed kind of differently, we'll put it, where they've got their own proprietary modeling that they've done through their consultant that helps manage basically the pump system that works to pump out that area into the Elm Fork. And so they know what can and can't work and what can and can't develop in that area specifically. So we kind of leave it to them when it comes to whether or not a site may need to detain or something like that. More likely than not in Valwood, it doesn't need detention because their system is set up as though the area would be developed eventually. That's why you've got some pretty big ponds around there to hold the water. But they do their own review to make sure that it would work, to make sure that everything's at the right elevation. We do review still ourselves the development that does happen because there's still a lot of storm sewer that we own in that area.
Okay.
So if there's a development that goes in and is contributing to our storm sewer systems, we still review that and we still make sure that that's not going to exceed the capacity of our systems.
And I was just curious, is Landon Lake there in the middle of that a functioning part of the flood control, or is it purely?
I believe so. Depends on how technical we want to get. So how the levees work there is basically in a flooding event, the Elm Fork of the Trinity River will fill up. It'll get higher. And so this whole area used to be floodplain. It used to be floodplain of the Elm Fork. And then back in I believe it was in the 80s when this started getting developed as Valwood, they put in these flood levees, basically big berms to keep the water in Elm Fork. But as a part of that, you've got water that's behind the levee in Valwood that wants to get to the river. It's got to store somewhere. So that's part of what Landon Lake serves as, is the storage of that extra water that eventually when Elm Fork recedes back down, Valwood can let that water go out. That's kind of how that functions. So yeah, Landon Lake is kind of a part of that, as well as I think that's might have been where they got the fill that they needed to construct the levees in the first place. But yeah, that's my understanding.
It's interesting because it's as long as I've lived there for 5 years, it's been constant level. It doesn't go up and down at all, for at least as near as I can tell. Thank you.
Yeah, they designed for some pretty extreme storm events when you're talking about building along the Trinity and its tributaries. So,
One other question. The car wash thing that you showed, I know exactly where it is. It's half a block from my house, and I've seen those guys, and I thought that can't be legal, but I didn't know who to call. Who do I call when I see them again? Because they're back every week.
yeah, call me.
Okay.
Yeah, call me or Shane Davis, Deputy Director.
Okay.
If you can't get a hold of one of us, we'll go and attend to that because, yeah, that would be against our stormwater ordinance.
Along those lines, is it illegal or inappropriate for a homeowner to wash their car in their driveway?
No, not necessarily. We would encourage, I understand there's a lot of people who are really into cars, are really apprehensive about taking their vehicles to commercial car washes. Our ordinance does allow for individual car washing on residential properties. So that's not disallowed by our ordinance.
Further questions? Yep.
Yeah, the 100-year floodplain, how often is that updated? Just thinking about the tendency now for there to be warmer water in the Gulf and so these storms to get bigger and bigger and dumping more rain. How was that 100-year set? Is it reset very often?
Yeah, so it is NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency. I think I got that right. They come up with new rainfall atlases every few years or so, the most recent one being what's called Atlas 14. And as a part of that, that updated the rainfall amounts based on the new statistical data that they have that's more recent. So when new studies happen in these areas, typically it's based on that data, that newer data that's accounting for these more frequent, higher intensity events. Now, what you're seeing potentially on FEMA maps might be older data, might be based on studies that were done in the 90s or the early thousands. But as a part of the updates that FEMA does, the hope is eventually when they get to the next round of updating the maps, that data will be included. So at the same time, we are also working on developing, so for Farmers Branch Creek, we have our own mapping and modeling that we use to regulate that floodplain And that's based on more up-to-date rainfall data than what FEMA has. So it's kind of, you'll find a lot of places where cities, and this isn't unique to us, where cities have their own models of creeks that are newer and more up-to-date than what FEMA has. But when FEMA does these updates, we'll work with them to get that updated.
Okay. And how big of an issue is blowing leaves and debris into the street? All day, every day, you see people doing that. How much of an issue is that for stormwater?
Yeah, so it's, it's not as bad as somebody dumping motor oil in the creek, but there is a lot of, I'll talk from a stormwater capacity perspective. That stuff blocks our drains all the time. So especially inlets that have grates, it blocks it up all the time. The other part on the stormwater quality is when all that leaves and foliage breaks down, assuming it's in the creek and not on a yard where those nutrients, the phosphorus, nitrogen, can get back into the yard, that phosphorus and nitrogen is being released inside of our creeks, inside of lakes, downstream, stuff like that. What that does is it encourages algal blooms, which are nasty, and they degrade the oxygen levels in our water bodies, which kill the wildlife. So that's why they're a bigger problem than what might seem kind of at first glance, is they can add a lot of additional nutrients to our creeks that wasn't going to get there if, say, the leaves just fell and they degraded there on the ground.
And what is the city's policy on people blowing things into the street?
That's against our stormwater ordinance. We actually just sent a letter today to a property owner about that. So it's an ongoing, it's hard to enforce though, because you've got so many trees that drop so many leaves and we only have eyes in so many places. But where we do know of the issue and we do know that it's either a repeat offender or somebody who's doing it pretty dramatically, like blowing all of their leaves into the street, we do our best to try and respond and provide notification that that's in
And how about
violation.
dust from construction sites?
So dust is a little bit harder. It would be a little bit out of my purview in terms of stuff that's generate from like wind or so forth, but we do regulate in terms of sediment that gets deposited in like roadways. So if a construction entrance is failing and you see a lot of dirt around the curb there, stuff like that, our stormwater inspectors will note that and we'll contact the contractor and get them to clean that up. And if they don't do that, that's where we have some regulations behind us, some enforcement behind us that we can make them sure that they tend to that issue.
All right, thank you.
Further questions? Yeah.
You mentioned a location that had failed and had to be fixed. How many projects are currently underway in the city?
So currently, the only one that is underway actively as far as drainage goes is the one you see right out here. But we do have one that's going through the bid process. That's a new erosion control project along Farmers Branch Creek, which is a pretty significant stretch of gabion wall to repair some erosion damage. So, but we kind of work with the amount of funding that we receive each year. So as opposed to some of our water projects or wastewater projects, where sometimes those can go a little bit per linear foot a lot further. When you're talking about pipe replacement versus building big gabion walls along the creek, we can only have about a couple of projects maybe moving at a time from a stormwater perspective. But we've got those kind of in the works, but in addition to that, we've got other projects that are either in the planning stages or in the engineering stages that we're working on.
So are there identified areas of concern within the city that need special attention?
Yeah, so that's part of the master drainage planning efforts that we've done. So for Farmers Branch Creek, we've got a study that basically outlined these are the areas of concern that we worked with a consultant on to identify this is the kind of project that needs to happen, this is the approximate cost, this is the level of severity. And so we've been using that, especially along Farmers Branch Creek, to identify where the projects have to happen and to help guide basically our budgeting going forward and knowing what needs to get done. So, yeah.
And is it your opinion that has flooding become a bigger issue recently or maintained the same over the course of time? What is your outlook?
For Farmers Branch specifically, I'll have to give it a few years to be able to give you an opinion on that, just because I've only been here since July. But outlook looking forward generally, kind of as Marcus was talking about, when in terms of us seeing more frequent and intense rainfall events, the risk of that is kind of directly related to the risk of flooding. It was only a couple of years ago, I think we've got, there was areas of downtown around Highland Park that got significant rainfall, around the 100-year rainfall amount, within a relatively quick span of time. And that's after maybe a few years back, they already saw something that intense. So, and that's also a product of just, we're getting better data. We're getting more data. As we get more data, we can better design for and predict what's going to happen. So we'll say the outlook is tentative. But like I said, we're doing projects, we're regulating development in a way to try to mitigate for the potential impacts of what we may or may not see in the future.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, it looks like the FEMA floodplains have gotten larger over the course of even the last 10 years. So I would hope that we're proactive rather than reactive. I don't want locations to get neglected or.
Yeah, and so that's why we're doing, specifically in flood control, that's why we've got the regulations, but also like on Cooks Creek, we expanded that channel that helped remove a lot of homes from the floodplain. We're currently working with FEMA actually to update that map to get that accounted for. And then with Farmers Branch Creek watershed, we actually have a detention pond go in, a regional detention pond go in to the northeast of the community college, kind of at the intersection. It's kind of where the curve happens of the road. I think you all know what I'm referring to, but that's also a regional detention pond that went in the last few years for that watershed to try and help out. And there's other projects we're seeking. The real limiter here is cost. Flood control projects are very expensive. And they're quite an undertaking for potentially marginal benefits where that money might be better spent elsewhere in terms of maybe erosion protection and trying to build for the conditions we currently have. And we're also limited by just the amount of open area we have in the city. The city's been developed for a long time. And so the amount of, as opposed to some other areas, maybe north of the Metroplex, where there's still a lot of open area, the options that we have for areas we can actually do these kinds of projects are very limited. And when that happens, the cost goes up to do those kinds of projects. So it's kind of a balancing act.
Great.
So I wish I could remember the name of the gentleman you replaced, but I don't think you met him. Well, you might have met him. Yeah, anyway. He was interested in what you just talked about, the retention ponds, and maybe increasing them on Farmers Branch Creek up kind of in the Brookhaven area. So one was constructed. I hear you properly that you said there was a new one not too long ago?
Yeah, so at least in the last couple of years, I can't remember if it was 22 or 21 or 23, somewhere in that area. It's basically at
Alpha?
Alpha and is it
Yeah.
Bella?
Yeah.
That
yeah.
area? Yes.
So I know he was talking about something even more dramatic in that area. But I also have a question. When developers are developing up, farther upstream here, all that concrete, does it ever come up that, okay, somebody's, torn something down or they don't want to build there anymore? Well, they may want to build there, but does somebody say, no, we can't do that because we want to increase the amount of, what do you call it, non-impervious?
Yeah, impervious. So,
Well, but
or
no, what I'm saying
pervious
is,
versus
how do we
impervious.
add back more grassland?
Yeah, and
know?
so, in terms of trying to mitigate for that, that's where the detention requirement upon redevelopment comes in. Now, I think the question of requirements for adding pervious area back in, adding grassed areas, landscaping back in to a more significant degree than just traffic islands and stuff like that. I don't want to put it on planning, but it's kind of a more holistic planning question when it comes to the requirements for development and what the appetite is of the city to make developers do that when something redevelops. That certainly would help our situation. And, you know, would be something that I think a lot of people would like to see a lot more of that green pervious area at that upstream end in those industrial
By the way, we're
areas.
coming up into the most intense time of the year. It was May and June. All the flooding that I've ever had, that's when it happens. End of May, first part of June. So I don't know if you'll give me your cell phone number, but I would love to text you. Because it's really impressive to go look at what happens. To see a 30-foot rise in a creek in a matter of, 30 minutes. It's pretty wild. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you once again. It's very informative, and I think hearing it the second time, I learned even more. So really appreciate your expertise that you bring to the city. I think previously, my understanding is we didn't have an official stormwater engineer, so your role is really valuable and helpful to these efforts. And as we work collaboratively also with you, as you mentioned, in the planning arm of it, of how we can best serve the city's needs overall.
Yeah, well, great. And like I said, you guys have my contact information on that first slide. Feel free to let me know any questions. And if you want me to come up here and talk about something again in more detail, happy to do it. So thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. All right, up next, item A3, discuss agenda items for future Planning and Zoning Commission consideration. Commissioners, anything for? Okay. So that takes us to the end of our study session. What we will do is, if you don't mind, we'll just take maybe a quick 5-10 minute, let's come at maybe 7:15. Does that work for everybody? So we have just a little brief break. Apologies to those of you that will be starting just a bit delayed for our regular meeting. All right, and with that, we adjourn our study session meeting, and we'll pick back up at 7:15. Thank you all. Good evening and welcome to the City of Farmers Branch Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. It is presently Monday, April 14th, 2025, 7:15 p.m. I'd like to begin by thanking the commissioners for their service. I will begin with item B on our agenda, citizen comments. This agenda item provides an opportunity for citizens to address the Planning and Zoning Commission on any matter that is not posted on the agenda. Anyone wishing to address the commission should complete a citizen's comments registration form and submit it to the chair prior to the start of the meeting. There is a 3-minute time limit for each citizen to speak, with a reasonable limitation on speakers on any one topic or item, with a maximum of 15 total minutes on the same topic item. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. The Planning and Zoning Commission is not permitted to take action on any subject raised by a speaker during citizen comments. When called, please approach the podium and state your name and address prior to beginning your comment. Please direct all comments to the commission and not to the audience. We've received no citizen comment forms this evening, so we'll proceed to our regular agenda items. Item C1, consider approval of the March 10th, 2025 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes and take appropriate action. Commissioners?
I propose that we approve the minutes as drafted.
Thank you. Second, okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor to approve the meeting minutes as presented? And that carries. Thank you. Next, we'll have a public hearing. Item D1, conduct a public hearing, consider the request for a specific use permit for a gasoline service station and convenience store on approximately 1.48 acres located at 13601 Midway Road within PD 64 and take appropriate action. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Chair Raley and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Brett Mangum. I'm the lead planner with the Department of Economic Development, Tourism, and Planning here at Farmers Branch. We have 2 cases on tonight's agenda. First case that we're going to be looking at is 25-SU-02. The subject site is addressed as 13601 Midway Road at the corner of Midway and Alpha. You can see on your screen a location map showing the northwest corner of that intersection. This is approximately 1.48 acres altogether. The current zoning on this is planned development. It's PD 64, which is various non-residential uses, primarily commercial in nature. The site is currently developed with a bank building that has been unoccupied for a number of months. It was previously Origin Bank, and it is vacant. The request tonight is for adding a specific use permit to the PD 64. That SUP would cover gasoline station and with a convenience store attached. Specifically, it's a Quick Trip or QT. So we've got some slides in here that show the development in a little bit more detail. You can see from this is the site plan as well as an elevation of the building. We're looking at a separate canopy in the front along Midway, and then the actual building or primary structure for the convenience store is set back behind the canopy, a little bit closer to the back of the property. There's a total of 20 fuel pumps in the front underneath the covered canopy. The convenience store is approximately 5,000 square foot, just a bit over that. The entire site, again, is about 1.5 acres. There's 7,200 square foot of landscaped area proposed as part of this development. We do have 2 draft conditions within the ordinance as drafted, and those 2 conditions are no outside storage or display of merchandise. And in our discussions with the applicant, they have been agreeable to that condition. We also have the second condition, which is a maximum of 2 monument signs, which one would be at the corner of Midway and Alpha, and the other one would be further back along Alpha where the existing driveway intersects with Alpha Road. As discussed previously in study session, the operation hours for this particular store as proposed would be 24 hours, not counting the potential alcohol sales component, which will be a separate case we'll get to momentarily. Looking at our comprehensive plan, the 2045 Farmers Branch Comprehensive Plan does indicate that this is future residential high density. With that being said, this is, rather than being specifically a zoning change, it's a specific use permit. So in a sense, we're just adding an overlay district on top of the existing zoning, which will stay in place. It will still be PD 64 if the SUP is approved, with or without conditions. So the comprehensive plan does say that, but it's not necessarily completely relevant since it's not a zoning change. We sent out notices as required by state law to 8 property owners and the subject site, and 2 letters also to the school districts in the area, so a total of 10 letters. The notification sign was also posted on the site as per the regulations. We do, in the presentation, it says no written response has been received. We have today, just late in the day, we did get 1 opposition letter, which was distributed to you at your desk, so you should have that to look over. It pertains to both this case and the following case. And we do have the development team here if you have any questions, specifically for the developer. If you have any questions on city policy or zoning, happy to answer those. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Mhm.
You mentioned this notification went to school districts. Did notification also go to the private schools in the area?
No, they're not within the 200-foot halo.
Okay, thanks.
So referenced in this letter of, not wanting it built is section 5.1 of Declaration of Covenants, Restrictions, and Easements. What sort of legal standing does that have over this specific property, if any? Do we open ourselves up to any sort of action?
Just speaking from my understanding of it, keep in mind I'm not legal, so they may have more to say than I do. But my understanding is the city does not get involved with private covenants and restrictions on a property. That's a third-party matter. It's basically a civil matter, so we probably won't have any comment on that. Sarah may have some additional comments.
That's absolutely correct. The deed restrictions are a private matter. From the city's perspective, an SUP, specific use permit, is the correct avenue to permit this use, so that's the process they're going through. The applicant and property owner would need to confer separately about deed restrictions.
Thank you.
You mentioned the zoning is only changing on this side. Is the zoning, it would be approved by right south of Alpha on the other side of the street or east of Midway?
It's a good question. So if this request is approved as presented, the SUP would only be applicable to this 1.5 acre site. So it
But
wouldn't apply to the rest of PD
I
64.
mean, the zoning, if it was just on the other side of the street, that would be apply, or it would be allowed.
As far as I know, gas stations are going to require an SUP regardless.
Okay.
If it was just a convenience store, that might be a different case because that's more considered retail. But when you have the gas station, that's what causes the SUP.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, with that, thank you. If the applicant wouldn't mind to come and state your name and address for the record, we'd be interested to receive your presentation and then ask you some questions, I'm sure.
Good evening. I am Andrew Ruig with Master Plan Land Use Consultants. My address, work address is 2201 Main Street, Suite 1280, Dallas, Texas. And I appreciate you all looking into this matter with us tonight. I'm here representing Quick Trip, and we also have representative from Quick Trip here with us today, and he'll have some comments following my presentation just to walk you through what exactly some of the considerations we have and have thought of for this particular proposal. So I want to just first highlight the aerial of the site itself. So as you can see, this is, I mean, the reason that Quick Trip is interested in this site is it's a great location for Quick Trip. It is a Midway Road, Alpha Road to a lesser extent in this particular area are both major thoroughfares in the city and carry a lot of traffic and a lot of trips, so it is a high visibility area. Looking at our particular site, this was a former bank, so this strip along Midway where our site is located is a commercial area. Everything essentially to the east of us is, for the most part, zoned LI, light industrial. I think there's a comment about that earlier where I believe SUPs would still be required for the fueling station piece, and there's less of a barrier, is my understanding, for the alcohol component. So we are next to the east side area of Farmers Branch. And I want to show you a couple examples of some of our other stores. So just a quick, overall of the area. We have retail just to our north, office to our south, multifamily, the Prairie Crossing multifamily development to our west. And then, it starts to get into the some retail, some industrial type uses to our east. So thinking of where our site is located, I wanted to show a couple visuals of existing sites. One here in Farmers Branch, I believe someone mentioned earlier, off of Luna and Mira-Lago on the 635 service road, and then also a similar site not too far from our location here in Farmers Branch in North Dallas on Arapahoe and Knoll Trail. So just thinking about where our site is today, it almost, you can kind of point at different directions if you're thinking about our area into a commercial corridor. You would think of that Luna and Mira-Lago site where we're essentially, this is a highly trafficked area. It's a great location for Quick Trip to be. And a lot of these trips aren't necessarily, Quick Trip isn't driving the trips there. And we also have our traffic engineer here tonight who can help explain some of the traffic considerations. But rather, these are more of a convenience factor for people that are residents nearby, work nearby. This is a convenience stop along the way. And, I think it was also mentioned, Quick Trip is top of the market for gas and convenience stores. They run a very clean, efficient, quality operation. So we're hoping that this will be another location that will work for Quick Trip and the city and be mutually beneficial. One other thing I wanted to point out on the bottom slide here, you'll notice on the Arapahoe Knoll Trail site, that's a little bit to the northeast of here on the east side of Dallas North Tollway, but a lot of recent Quick Trip builds have been in more urban areas. So you'll notice there's multifamily directly behind the Quick Trip here. We also have stores in West Village, near Uptown Dallas. So they're really starting to market some of the stores as the convenience goods for nearby residents and nearby office workers. So wanted to highlight some of those similar type locations to the site that we're requesting the SUP for tonight. Here's, I have a couple of renderings that I can show tonight just to get you a better sense of what this would look like visually. I know you've seen in the staff report, the site plan, landscape plans, and we can review those as well, but wanted to just get another visual in front of you for what the renderings would look like. And I have some other ones, but this is a pretty good example to see. We're keeping all of the sidewalks on Arapahoe and, or not Arapahoe, sorry, the two major thoroughfares we're on. We've also worked with staff to preserve some of the trees that were originally slated for being removed. So we have a large, landscape buffer meeting those requirements. I think I read in the report we're a little bit over the minimum requirement. So that's one thing that we've made sure we've done. And Quick Trip always keeps up their landscaping. I don't want to say this, I represent other convenience stores and other matters, but Quick Trip always has the best landscaping. They always keep it up top notch versus some of the other operators that are out there. A couple other things I wanted to point out. You saw this future land use map in the presentation. And, if you look at our particular area, this is one small site that, in the previous plan was slated as the residential high density. You obviously can't develop high density or much density, if anything, at the current location. We're just one small parcel on the hard corner. And if you'll notice, the mixed use, which can have a variety of land uses included, is all, essentially surrounding our site. I think I also looked in the east side area plan, and this was pegged for mixed use in that plan as well. So, something to consider, that this would be another use that is compatible with, the existing land uses that are out there. This may be, I think, for the next piece of the public hearing, but I'll just quickly bring it up. I wanted to point out the alcohol overlay districts that exist in the city right now, which are all these areas in blue. You probably saw this in the staff report, but in general, these areas are on the periphery of Farmers Branch or on highly traffic intersections in the city. So there are some interior areas that are pegged for, alcohol sales, primarily the areas in blue, I believe, denote for off-premise consumption, meaning, to go, versus I think the areas in purple are for on-premise, having a drink at a brewery or a bar or whatever. That's not what we're proposing here. So, where we're at here on Midway and Alpha, this is another major intersection in the city, and we're requesting to have, similar ability to sell alcohol at this particular location. And the Quick Trip, that exists in the city today, they're off of Luna Road. That, you can see it on the map. That's one of the other areas that's pegged for the alcohol overlay. I think you've seen the site plan. We can talk through that. We're not proposing to change any of the ingress egress points from the existing bank location. I mean, what we do is we'd scrape the site of the current bank and then rebuild it to the new store standards. This is proposed to be the newest generation of the Quick Trip stores, so they've really upped their game as far as providing for more of the convenience goods, more drink varieties, not just alcoholic drinks, but other drinks that you can, stop by if you're leaving work or you're leaving school. We also have, we can discuss the landscape plan. Per staff request, we did save some additional trees that we could. There are some conflicts with power lines, so we couldn't save all of the existing trees, but we took a second look to see if there was any that we could save, and I think there was 4 that we were able to preserve with our plan, as you can see in the tree preservation plan. I'll quickly flip through just a couple of other renderings. Here's the hard corner of Midway and Alpha. So we also have the allowance of 2 monument signs, which you can see in the foreground here. Here is the entrance off Midway Road to the site. So this would be the existing slip street that the former bank and the current retail site are both utilizing. Here's a quick view from the back of the store. So this is that slip street, and another visual of what the potential store would look like. And then here's a view from Midway Road looking at the gas canopy and convenience store use. And then another one from Alpha Road looking into the site. So, there's the overall renderings that we put together for this site, just to give you a sense of what this could look like. There's a couple other, we were obviously here for the study session and heard some questions, so I wanted to address as many as I could just through my comments. We do have a traffic engineer, and he'll speak to kind of what he's looked at, ingress egress considerations. As far as economic impact, this having a Quick Trip here will increase the value of the site, thus increasing the amount of taxes received by the city. We haven't done a full calculation of that, and Quick Trip typically doesn't like to give out that information in full, but it's greatly enhancing the value of the site, which then enhances the tax base. I think there's some talk about on a roundabout way, how long are Quick Trips usually at a certain location? And Corey with Quick Trip let me know that, just as an example, in city of Dallas, they have 192 stores, and they've only closed 3 of those, in the past 20 years or so. So their aim is really to be long-term partners for sites. So, they want to stay in the community and provide that convenient service to the Farmers Branch community. And that's something that they, work hard at. And I think, again, it was mentioned that they are top of the line as far as the convenience and gas business. A couple of other notes, and Corey with Quick Trip can get into these a little bit more, but we do have a fairly robust security system with 24/7 cameras that are monitored by the headquarters in Tulsa. So there's obviously no loitering signs, and they have the resources to help prevent any issues should any issues start to come up at any particular location. So they are very cognizant of making sure that their stores are safe. They want to provide that good user experience so people will come back. I mean, I know there's other convenience stores out there that you might not want to mess with because you don't feel safe there, but that's the exact opposite of what Quick Trip does with their stores. Is they keep a very clean operation, have a lot of security and processes in place to ensure that people feel safe while they're there. I think there was also a question about alcohol sales, TABC laws. There's a private school in the vicinity, but it's not within the 300 feet radius that what TABC would require, or I guess exclude rather, from alcohol sales. So we're well outside of that range. And then furthermore, Quick Trip hasn't had any violations with TABC at any of the I guess stores nearby. I did a check with TABC, and again, I don't want to throw other clients of mine under the bus, but Quick Trip probably has the best reputation amongst other convenience store groups that we typically see looking at zoning and alcohol-related items. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I do want to allow Corey with Quick Trip to also talk to you a little bit about their operation, and we can help answer any questions following that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to go ahead? Just please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Corey Vaughn, 8700 Freeport Parkway, Irving, Texas, 75063. Good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it. I want to first say that staff has been wonderful to work with. We deal with a lot of municipalities, and they could be a little more challenging, but staff has been great throughout this process. Thank you, Andrew. I have a couple of things to mention, but mostly Andrew did a pretty good job of addressing some of the things that we wrote down. I'll just touch on a couple of them. I can't state enough that Quick Trip is about brand excellence. We protect our brand. We're still a privately owned company. We're on the Forbes Top 100 privately owned companies in the U.S. We're on the Fortune 100 best companies to work for. We do promote from within. We do love to partner with the community, and 5% of all of our revenue goes back to charity, and we try to contribute those charities to the communities that we're in, along with the United Way, Folds of Honor, and we take a lot of pride in our product and what we offer. As Andrew mentioned, we have a military-grade, top-notch security system. If you notice in some of our newer stores and even the older model stores that we're kind of redeveloping, we've added more security and more cameras. And so we have 360-degree around the perimeter of the property, in front, behind the store. We've increased our visibility, so lighting, and you can see and feel safe when you're there. We have a monitoring company that monitors 365, 24/7. There's someone always on duty. So whether it's our employees who are in the store or someone who's monitoring, there's always a way to call for help. We're a safe place. I can go on and on about Quick Trip, but at this time, I'll let you guys ask questions. And anything traffic related, Kelly with Lee Engineering is our traffic engineer.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Commissioners, questions for our applicant? Go ahead.
I'm curious, after 10 PM at night,
Yes.
between 10 PM and like 6 or 7 AM, what percentage of, I don't know, alcohol sales or I'm curious about alcohol sales, but I'm also curious about gasoline sales, just kind of a feel for activity that late at night.
So it's a very good question. And I will tell you, it goes on a store-by-store, case-by-case basis, whether, of course, if it's one of our big travel centers or you're on the interior of a municipality or like the other store that we have on 635 in Luna, it's right off of the highway. So you get a lot more pass-by traffic and people exiting and getting back on the highway. Now, the store like this one is more on the interior, not closer to the highway, so it's meant more to serve the community around. And typically, we find when the traffic dies down at lower peak hours, that we won't get as many pass-by trips or people are not searching out. It's kind of more of the community, whoever is up or can't sleep or they work a night shift will come and visit the store. But it doesn't typically bring more than what the area noticeably has on a typical night. I hope that answers your question.
Go ahead, Pat. Sorry.
You mentioned lighting, which raises a question in my mind about lighting behind the store, and directly behind the store is some apartments. How do you keep the lights from shining directly into apartment windows?
Very good question. We have what we call downlighting, and correct me if I'm wrong, city staff, we're not allowed to typically have bleed off of the property line. And so you wouldn't be very visible. The sign that you've seen in the back is just to kind of dress it up a little bit. We put a rear rendering because we noticed the other buildings in the area had a rear finish, so it wouldn't look like a, if you're living there, a solid brick wall. But that sign wouldn't typically be lit at night.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
Further questions for our applicant?
I have just one
Yep.
question. It's kind of connected
Yes, sir.
to what happened during the work session. Okay, is that better? All right, thanks. With regard to Midway Road and the fact that you got up at Spring Valley, there's a 7-Eleven there. And late at night, Midway Road, 6 lanes, deep nights, which is a term that we had with the police department. Midway Road gets pretty fast at night. And having 2 establishments that are that close together with both selling alcohol late at night and on the weekend evenings, my only concern, and it would have to be something that Addison and Farmers Branch PD would have to work out, but getting a little bit more scrutiny on the road and making sure that there were frequent drop-bys by officers just to let the people who are maybe going in to straggle and wait and congregate and so on and so forth, sort of encourage them to move along. I know the company pretty well. I've been to Tulsa. I know how Quick Trip operates, and it's a very good operation. I would just be a little more comfortable. Certainly not a deal killer, but certainly would want to see that there was some proactive stuff done as far as keeping traffic moving, getting the 7-Eleven and QT distance to where the traffic keeps moving and moving so you don't get congregation, because in the city of Dallas, there are a whole bunch of places where 1 block, 2 blocks away, you've got 2 convenience stores, and then 2 blocks away, you've got another one, and all there is a congregation on Friday and Saturday nights. If you can avoid that, no problems.
Definitely understand your concern. One of the things that we pride ourselves in, and forgive me, I am a real estate project manager currently. I've been with Quick Trip. This is my 20th year. I started working in the stores. and I've got promoted through the process. I used to work overnights. And one thing that we do pride ourselves on is we give our law enforcement, our officers, free drinks at any time that they like when they come in our stores. And so from time to time, along with the customer service, they do pass by the store and they grab their drink and they help us out in monitoring the parking lot. And they do understand that they have access to our video and security cameras as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Go ahead.
Can you provide any insight as to how Quick Trip chose this site? You know, like it's been mentioned before, there's a 7-Eleven on Spring Valley, there's a Chevron at 635 Midway. Just south of that, there's an Exxon on the other side of the street. So you're going to have a lot of competition. Yeah, I mean, what brought you here? To this
Understandable.
specific site?
I will tell you that there's a lot of thought that goes into the process of site selection. I am in development, and my higher-ups are into the site selection, and there are traffic counts and there's algorithms to support why we kind of pick the locations that we do, as well as making sure that you have access and convenience. And we don't necessarily take our competition out, but we can coexist because there's a need there. And so through the algorithms and through corporate and the site selections and the long process that they go through to pick the sites, that's kind of one of the reasons Andrew mentioned we don't close Quick Trips. The two that we did close in Market, just out of honesty, we relocated them to a better position in those two neighborhoods. The one that we did close, I will say there was a good offer on the table for closing that Quick Trip. But other than that, we do a very good job at our site selection, and we make sure that we complement the area as well as that we open up sites in an area that can maintain and service the community, even though there's other competitors there.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Additional questions?
Sure, yeah, so the Quick Trip at Luna and 635, man, it's a successful Quick Trip. But trying to even drive through there sometimes is like hard to get through the parking lot. It's hard to get in. I mean, it's just that, and so the one thing I'm imagining here is if this were an uber successful Quick Trip, that this could just be almost too much for this spot. You know, it's just and I guess I would ask you, I see the egress behind the building to the alley, directly across that are the apartments. If you were living in those apartments, why would you want that? I mean, and if you were, and I count you have almost 50 parking spots in addition to all of the just to the gas pump. So I guess that goes back to your idea that this is really a grocery store that has gas pumps. So, I mean, I could just imagine it being too successful, and that this whole intersection just becomes difficult to manage, you know. So I guess get your response.
Well, I can speak to some of the parks. Our layouts are well thought out, and they're not meant to, if you see by the design, they're not made to hold all of the vehicles all of the time. These are designed for peak periods, which is going to work, right, AM and then PM. And I'll let Kelly speak towards the circulation. But we have so many parks so that the circulation works well around the canopy. And we typically have a greater distance, about 65 feet from the MPD or the multiple pump dispenser to the front door, and also on the other side, so that you do have circulation during the peak periods. Completely understand about the residents behind. Andrew showed a couple of other properties that we own that have the multifamily behind it. Even Luna and 635 on the other side of the creek has multifamily. Understandable, it could be challenging, and one of the design that we kept We actually liked the parks behind the store, so it frees up a little bit more if, you know, the residents wanted to utilize that. We made it a point not to take it out, and Kelly will speak to it more, but you have circulation as well through the shared easement in the drive, and then
Yeah, so when you're talking about the traffic, so again, so if you're on Alpha Road heading east, you have to take a left on Midway Road and then take a U-turn, right? That
Yes.
Midway to get back around. And then if somebody is leaving the station on Midway Road and they want to turn left on Alpha Road, they're going to be crossing like 3 or 4 lanes of traffic in a very short period of time. So those two things, again, I just imagine if this is a really busy quick trip, that could just get really dangerous, potentially.
that's out of my, so I will
And
defer to our.
Kelly, if you just state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Kelly Parma with Lee Engineering, 3030 LBJ Freeway, Dallas, Texas, just down the road. So from a parking standpoint, first of all, it's a convenience store. So obviously, you don't want customers driving by and say, hey, it's full, I'm not going to go there. So you allow for some extra parking just so that it appears to be there's places to park. They can go in and get service at Quick Trip. From a circulation and standpoint, they're using the existing driveways, existing movements. For the two movements you mentioned, for the ones coming from the east on Alpha, this is where the convenience kind of comes in, because if it is too difficult to make the U-turn, if you have to go further out the way, then customers will, even though it is QT, they will find another place that they can go to if it becomes inconvenient. And so for the traffic that wants to go to the north, so basically part of the whole concept of convenience store gas station, just not for Quick Trip, but for any type of similar development, is the concept of pass-by trips. And so it's mainly people that are going by this site anyway. They're not typically making a special trip just to go here, to go back home. And the trip generation manual that is put together by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, just as a point of reference, about 3/4, 75% of trips generated by these types of land uses are pass-by trips. And so a lot of the trips are going by the site already. And considering the side of the road that this is on, we believe that most of that traffic will be southbound and westbound, because it's easy, it's right in, get filled up, get your coffee, and then just to go right out to continue going southbound. And so we feel that obviously the easier movement in will be the primary movements. For the eastbound going at Alpha, we didn't envision there's a whole lot of people doing that. For people, if they can make that U-turn, we know that the eastbound U-turn to enter the driveway on Alpha would be difficult to make that U-turn. If they can, they have that capability. We don't really envision many people making the left, going up to the median opening, and then making a U-turn to go back to the Q2.
Could that be, this is a city thing. It's not currently, it doesn't prevent a U-turn, but I was there today and it is a tight turn. It's like, could that left turn lane be made no U-turn? If it becomes, maybe not now, but if it becomes a problem, is that something that could be?
That's something that could be discussed with the Public Works Department if there's a need for that type of study, so certainly.
And then you had mentioned somebody that's coming, that wants to go north on Midway. And so at the existing median opening, you have to cross 4 lanes of traffic. I don't know, I've been on a lot of roads in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I think this is one of the few that actually has an 8-lane divided roadway section. So this is a unique arterial. Most of them are 6-lane divided. One of the things that we noticed is that if you are not comfortable making that westbound left turn to continue north, it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but you do have access to Sigma Road, and you're able to exit on there's a driveway right in front of the apartments that provides access to Sigma, which then you can travel north to have access to a signal to make a left turn to go north on Midway. So, and like I said, during peak hours, I'm a fairly aggressive driver, depending on who you ask. But I've got a similar situation where I live, and it's only a 3-lane section. There's a Kroger and a Walmart right next to each other, so you can kind of figure how busy that is. During off peaks, 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, 2 o'clock on a Friday, I don't have a problem crossing a median opening like that. But in the PM peak hour, when traffic is backed up at a signal at the location, I go out of my way to avoid doing that. And I would imagine, like I said, if it's not convenient, then the traffic won't, they'll find another store, unfortunately, or find, like I said, the access to Sigma to go where they need to go.
Thanks for that. Any further questions for Kelly, our traffic engineer?
I just want to make sure I understand the flow. If you're going west on Alpha, is there an entrance into the store for like behind it?
Yeah, there's an entrance now.
Okay,
right-
that's what I thought.
Yeah, on the lower left of the yellow squarish.
Yeah, the lower left
Yeah.
corner, just go up from behind the store and go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any further? Go ahead.
I have a question, but it's more targeted towards staff.
Okay. Go ahead.
We talked a lot about traffic, I guess, for some of these gas stations and how it might impact the use. What I'm thinking about are the new apartments being built on the other side of Midway and then down there off Alpha and Spring Valley, some more new apartments. There's a lot more people coming to this area, bringing more traffic to the existing gas stations in the area. Could staff kind of enlighten us how many new, residences are coming to this Midway area that might benefit from the use of a convenience store?
Absolutely. The Midway McEwen intersection is the project that you mentioned. I don't have the exact unit count in front of me, but I can get that for you. And then the second project that you mentioned, can you remind me?
I believe it was by that Saltgrass Steakhouse.
Oh, yes, along 635.
And there's one being completed now and a new one planned right there.
Certainly. If you give me just a minute, I can pull those numbers up. City Council recently considered or received a presentation regarding multifamily development in this area, and it has unit counts for each one,
Yeah.
so we can provide that as well.
Yeah, I would just like to consider that. I use some of the gas stations in here, and I can see if a large population is increasing here, that those gas stations will be full up anyway, leading to more congestion. An additional gas station may relieve some of the congestion at those existing locations.
Certainly, and, as Kelly mentioned, Midway Road is almost over capacity. We've got 4 lanes in each direction. So in addition to the residential traffic that's coming in with these new apartment complex, you'll see a lot of pass-through traffic. Midway is a major corridor, north-south, so I can get those unit counts to you, no problem.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one more, and this is probably for staff as well. Do we have any knowledge of what sort of effect a fuel service use has on nearby other businesses like retail, like the Bay 34th Street? How does this development affect those places of business?
In terms of visitor traffic or economic impact or?
Yeah. Does it increase visitor traffic because people are already getting off the road? Does it have any effect? Do we have any record of that or any knowledge of that?
I would say it's hard to measure that type of impact. As the applicant mentioned, when you see the site transition from an existing bank building, that's probably relatively low traffic compared to a QT gas station, which we all know generates higher traffic. You'll definitely have more, pass-through trips and the ability for people to visit multiple sites. And, somebody might be stopping at that site that doesn't normally stop at that corner. And so there's definitely the potential for that. It's difficult to measure, say, with certainty. And then I do have those multifamily numbers. So the project at the corner of Midway and McEwen is 364 units. And then the Presidium project that's on LBJ, that's finishing completion right now, is 338 units.
Do you know if there are any other planned sites nearby that Midway
There are a
location?
few sites in that area on the east side that have zoning entitlement. We'll send y'all a copy of that presentation so you can have the exact numbers.
Thanks. Any further questions for our applicant, for staff, further discussion? Go ahead, Hera. No? Okay. A reminder, this is a public hearing, so we will take any public hearing comments if there are any. Okay, seeing none, and I had received no public hearing forms.
So I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you. And seconded. Any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, will all those in favor to close the public hearing? And that's unanimous. Thank you all. And then we'll hear action on the item.
I move to recommend denial of ordinance number 3922.
Thank you.
I second.
Okay. Any further discussion on the item? Okay. All those that would like to vote for denial, a recommended denial of the project, all those? Okay. All those who would like to vote against denial, it's a double negative, it's a little confusing, but if you'll please. Okay. We may need to hear a different motion on this item, it appears, as that did not carry.
Well, I know we can put stipulations, and this is too vague but it's just, what if it's just such a crazy, busy, crazy, successful store? I mean, it really could make this corner difficult. And so I'm wondering what mitigation opportunities there are if that happens. Like, how do you deal with that? How does the city deal with that?
Given that this is a developed site, although a full traffic impact analysis wasn't required, normally what we're looking for with those submittals is if any off-site improvements are needed, such as signal, decel lane, those types of improvements. In this case, you're really at the corner of two major roads that are built to handle the capacity that's existing and proposed. You've got a signalized intersection at Alpha and Midway, as well as Sigma and Midway, as was mentioned earlier. And so when our staff team took a look at this, there really weren't any off-site improvements that were anticipated to be needed with this development. That said, I think the question was asked earlier about prohibiting U-turns at that intersection if we're noticing a specific issue once this is operational and is driving traffic to the site. And that's certainly something that can be evaluated as a, on a complaint basis or as a proactive means of addressing traffic flow in this location. But we really wouldn't anticipate any changes to the roadway themselves.
Even though it's not the public hearing is closed, can I still ask a question of the applicant?
We can reopen the
So
public hearing.
I guess I would put that to you. If you have a situation like this, because it would be a nightmare for you too, if it was so successful that it was just, so if that, and it must have happened in your chain, like what do y'all do? What happens?
I wanted to just put this into perspective as far as the type of site that this is. So I know we talked about the Luna Road site earlier, and that's essentially, it's a highway site. So that, has the higher opportunity for it to be, you mentioned earlier that, it's packed always. This is a more urban, suburban site, so you're not getting people on the highway that are saying, okay, hey, there's an exit sign for QT, I need to stop here. So I don't see this as being, it's going to be a successful store because Quick Trip puts a lot of effort into selecting their sites, as you heard earlier, but it's not going to be a regional draw, more of a community-focused draw. Midway obviously is a highly trafficked thoroughfare, but it's a different store in sense of, our more community-focused stores versus the more highway-centric stores. So, I guess that's the most I can think of as far as what will happen. And, some of the other things that were mentioned, it is a convenience store, so hence the convenience aspect of it. If one thing is, and this applies to other, types of uses like Starbucks, for example, if you drive by a Starbucks, you see the drive-through line is wrapping around the building, you're going to go and find your coffee elsewhere. So that scenario has the potential of also happening is if you see it's packed, you're going to go drive up Midway to the 7-Eleven over there or drive down and there's another gas station. Maybe it's not your first choice, but at the end of the day, it is a convenience experience. So I hope that kind of helps put it into perspective a little bit.
Would the applicant happen to know the number of customers for the convenience store versus the gas station, perhaps maybe at the tollway location? What was it, the tollway in Arapahoe, I believe, that you referenced that was similar build to this one?
Yes, I'm not very familiar or well-versed. I would have to look that information up. Our stores typically have peak times during the year, and that store hasn't been open long enough to give true data on what the volumes are. It's up and down through the holidays. Our busy season is basically summertime, and then the wintertime is the slower periods when people are inside. If I can help Vice Chair answer part of your question, it is not out of the realm of possibilities. We have revisited if we think there's something that's not safe about the way we develop one of our stores or over time, that it did cause some issue. And of course, through traffic analysis, that's why we hire some of the best engineers, because we don't want to guess at something that's not going to be safe. We've worked with TxDOT, we've worked with the city where we come back and revisit and say, hey, you've had this number of complaints, or the data shows that, hey, people are making this turn and movement that they shouldn't be making. And we will go back with, of course, the proper documentation and make improvements that, of course, the experts would tell us, hey, this is going to work. So that's not out of the realm of possibility. We want to do the right thing for our customers as well as the community. And if it's not safe, then yeah, we typically don't want to do that.
Thank you once again. I think we'll have to probably reclose the public hearing. So, because that's okay, we reopened it, that's fine. That's fine. We're just trying to follow our process.
So I'm moving to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Seconded. And any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, all those in favor to close the public hearing? All righty, and now I believe we are ready to hear action on this item.
I'll motion to approve as presented.
Recommended approval.
I will recommend second.
And seconded. Any further discussion on this item? All right, all those voting in favor to recommend approval? All right, and all those voting against recommending approval? Thank you, gentlemen. And with that, that does carry. This will go to City Council May 6th. Thank you all. All right. Appreciate your time and energy on that one. And up next, item D2. We will conduct a public hearing and consider the request to amend the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, Article 5.5, Beer and Wine Sales Overlay District, and Appendix C maps to allow beer and wine sales for off-premise consumption on approximately 1.48 acres of property located at 13601 Midway Road, and take appropriate action. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Chair Raley and members of the P&Z. Again, Brett Mangum with Economic Development, Tourism, and Planning. This case is a companion case to the one we just heard. same location, 13601 Midway Road. 25-ZA03 is the official case number. What this is, just to break it down, we dealt with the zoning component before. This would be zoning in a sense of expanding the entitlements to do sales of alcohol for the convenience store portion of this Quick Trip development. Kind of breaking down how alcohol sales work within the city limits of Farmers Branch. We have a setup that has two different overlays. There's the beer and wine overlay, which is what we're looking at potentially expanding if this is approved as presented. There's another overlay for, I believe, on-premise, which is more like restaurants and bars and that sort of thing. This is not involved in that particular overlay, so there won't be any changes to that overlay. This beer and wine overlay would allow for off-premise consumption, so it would be sales of beer and wine. It would not include liquor sales or package store allowance. So again, this is a companion case. The zoning would remain in place, PD 64, and if the SUP is approved, that would be an overlay on top, and this would be like a third overlay to allow for the sales where they're not allowed currently. This just has a map showing the city limits, and all the blue areas are areas that are where the beer and wine overlay is currently allowing those sales. So you see the Four Corners area is pretty prominent. The Beltline Road corridor is Zone 5 to the north, and then there's a few major intersections. Midway and LBJ is one of them, and then on the east side over near the Galleria. We also have some down Mira-Lago where the existing QT is within our city limits. This would be creating a new zone, Zone 11, at that intersection. So it would not pertain to any other portion of PD 64. It would just pertain to the 1.5 acres of the subject site. Again, same comprehensive plan analysis. Keep in mind that this is just like the 30,000-foot view, so to speak, so it's not meant to be granular in the sense like zoning is, where it's parcel by parcel. This is just kind of a generic roadmap of how the city council envisioned the city to develop over the course of the next couple of decades. So it is future residential high density. That being said, we would request a little leniency here because this is a major commercial node at Midway and Alpha. So it's probably not sensible to have residential development as we previously discussed here, just due to the site constraints. I believe we've gotten, it's just the one opposition letter. We have not received any other feedback in regards to the alcohol sales portion of this request. And it looks like that's all of my presentation. Happy to answer any questions if there's anything on city policy, but we have the developer here as well to answer any questions regarding the business operations.
Thank you again, Brett. And I believe the applicant already mentioned some of these items in their presentation, but we will perhaps entertain questions first for staff, if there are any. And go ahead.
It's in our packet, but just for the sake of clarity, this permit, if approved, is not tied to the owner of the property or this use. It is for any use now and in the future on this property. So if somebody wanted to come put in mixed use in 20 years, they would still have alcohol sales permitted.
Yes, that is correct.
Further questions for staff? All right, any questions for our applicant on this item? Okay, well, a reminder, it is a public hearing. I've received no public hearing cards, so, or forms.
Move to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
I second.
And seconded. Any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, all those in favor to close the public hearing? Thank you kindly. And now we'll hear action on the item.
I'll move to recommend approval as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, all those voting in favor to recommend approval? All right, all those voting against recommending approval? Thank you. And with that, it carries, and this too will go to City Council on May 6th. Thank you all for your time and energy, and with that, we will reach adjournment at 8:14 p.m. Thank you very much.